What is going on, guys? Jack here, and welcome back to episode number 89 of Park to Prem here with Nottingham Forest. If you missed yesterday's Champions League final episode, you know what I'm going to say. Make sure to go check it out. Today, we say an emotional farewell to Nottingham Forest. After 16 long seasons of Park to Prem and FM21, today marks my final episode as a manager. Of course, we will have a couple more episodes where we go into the future, which I know you guys always love to see, kind of see what becomes of Nottingham Forest after we leave. Will they keep hold of Irk? Will Piotr continue to be the club captain? They're kind of the two questions I have on my mind, to be honest, and all will be answered over the course of a couple of videos coming your way in the near future. But yes, of course, it was a bit of a disappointing end last episode as we lost that Champions League final 2-1 to Manchester United. In some ways, it was quite fitting, I feel like, for the series to end with this result. I appreciated the love massively on the last video. You guys seemed to enjoy it, even if the outcome wasn't exactly what we were looking for. Yeah, today is going to be, this big look back at the club history, our own manager profile. Before I do get into that, though, just a couple of little bits of housekeeping. Firstly, I know there's going to be a load of you guys who want to get your hands on this Park to Prem save game. I'm going to be uploading it for Patreon supporters tomorrow. There'll be a Patreon post that goes out where the file is available. And then beyond that, in a week's time, that post will unlock for anyone to access and anyone to kind of download the file. With my Patreon supporters, I like to give you guys a little bit of a thank you, a little bit of early exclusive access to stuff like save files once I finish playing a save game. I often get asked, Jack, why don't you save them whilst you're actually playing the game? And the answer is, I used to do it, and people would just kind of data mine the save games and then just tell me all my players' potentials and who the best players are who I should be signing. And I'm going to be honest, it doesn't make the save game all that fun when that happens. So for obvious reasons, I don't do that anymore. Just one other little bit of kind of news, I suppose. I mentioned at the end of last episode, but just to reiterate, with kind of what's next, Win One Take One is going to be becoming a daily series for the foreseeable future, kind of filling the void that Park to Prem has. Upon that series finishing, we will go into a whole new Let's Play. I feel like if you haven't been watching Win One Take One, yeah, I've been missing out. It's been really fun. I've had some of the most crazy games of Football Manager in it. Additionally, if you've not kind of enjoyed that so much, which, but save game's completely personal choice, I recommend checking out last year's Park to Prem if you haven't already. If you've enjoyed this adventure, I promise you'll find a lot to enjoy with last year's Park to Prem. Anyway, that is all the housekeeping out the way. Shall we talk about this blooming save game? And I think there's only one place to start, and that is with the best 11 overall, the Nottingham Forest. Who is here? Who isn't here? I'll tell you who is here. Toby! He's here. He's, of course, the Manchester United backup goalkeeper now. A fate worse than death, some would argue. Sold to them for £30 million. Considering he's not played for them at all, I think it works out as a good sale for us, but he is in the kind of dream best 11. 204 appearances. That's pretty good going for a goalkeeper. And well, interestingly enough, actually, when it comes to the centre-backs and the defence as a whole, it's lots of familiar faces, 3 of which still start for us today. Sampaio playing, of course, at right-back. He's got 196 appearances. Then you got Luis Navio with 272 appearances in the league. Which, when you kind of say that aloud, it sounds like a very big number until you realise that Piotr has 370 appearances with 44 goals. What a player. I would love to know your favourite player from this save game. I feel like there's going to be Team Piotr and Team Irk, and they're the kind of two players who are going to be duelling it out. It obviously feels like a lifetime ago that we were signing him for Nottingham Forest. 10 years ago now for the Championship for 4.7 million. But a player who's just been an ever-present part of our team. He's been so consistent over the years. Really popped up with some big goals when they mattered. And although, of course, we didn't win last episode, it was quite fitting, I think, that Piotr was the man to get the final goal of Park to Prem FM21. Anyway, at left-back, and he's not really a left-back, I don't know why he's here, we've got Paulo Silva. Remember this guy? Yeah, he was a regular player for 5 years. You can see sold to Chelsea for 68 million. Considering it's a 68 million pound player, is a 7.0 average rating acceptable? I'm not entirely sure. He's a good player. He was never really the regular starter for us for more than a couple of seasons, but I guess in a position of high turnover, he is kind of considered the overall best 11 best player for Forest. Of course, it's worth remembering that when we joined Forest, they were a bit of a yo-yo team. They'd gone up, they'd gone down, and as a result, there'd kind of been a quite high turnover in players. Of course, with us now having been kind of in the position we've been in for a little while, we probably have provided the club with its longest period of stability, not just in terms of league finishes, but in terms of the squad not changing too drastically. And as a result, a lot of the players who make up kind of the recent era of Nottingham Forest do kind of course, find themselves in this kind of best 11. Anyway, in the midfield, we've got David Lind, who I still have a really soft spot for. I mean, he's still only 25, an England international. He plays regularly. I feel like in another timeline, I get way more out of David Lind. Like, he's not been a bad performer, and I feel like the average ratings for centre midfielders are kind of weird anyway in certain roles, and I think within the role he played in the team, he was always going to struggle to get super outrageous average ratings, but what a phenomenal player he's been. The 25-year-old. I think when we signed him for 19 million and he was kind of 18 years old, it was perhaps a little bit of a punt. I think when you look at it now, you have to kind of look at it as a good bit of business. I mean, if he was a player playing for a Manchester United, a Manchester City, and he was English, you'd comfortably be paying over 50 million for him. So, kind of with hindsight, I feel like we got a good deal on him. Of course, Adrian Smith also features in the best 11. Another player like Piotr, who's been here since the beginning. I suppose, unlike Piotr, never been quite as regular a member of the first team, particularly in the last couple of years. There's been years where he's been super, super dependable. And don't get me wrong, he is a top quality player, but he's one of those players who just fell short, I feel like, of being a player who you could play in a championship or Champions League and Premier League winning team, if that makes sense. He's great. He's just not quite kind of top European quality. So over recent years, he's kind of found himself falling down the pecking order. But he's a fan favourite, and he's one of the few players in this team that came through the academy, even if it was before we were in charge. And I think it goes without saying, he's been a pretty important part of the team for many, many years, particularly our first couple of years in the Championship, in the midfield, as a defensive winger. Wherever we asked him to play, he was always dependable. And of course, the other man making up the midfield is Largo, who I want to believe will retire at Nottingham Forest. I want to believe this guy's in it for the long haul. What a phenomenal player. I feel like his addition 4 years ago really marked the beginning of dominance here. The fact that we had the pulling power to pull a player away from Chelsea, one of the best players in the Premier League, and have him join us. I think, yeah, that was kind of a quite big statement at the time, but I think it's still a big statement now. He is just absolutely top draw. I feel like with Largo, I've not drawn too much attention to just how world class he is. In any other save game, you'd look at this centre mid and go, wow, he is the best centre mid in the world. I don't feel like I've done that nearly enough for you, Largo, but you are absolutely bloody brilliant, son. Anyway, in the midfield, we've got Erk out on the right, not entirely surprising. A player who's been top draw, perhaps had one of his best years ever this year, somewhat short of the 7.72 average rating he had a few years ago, but considering the calibre of players he's surrounded by, it doesn't need to be a one-man army anymore with Erk leading the line, but he kind of just makes it his duty, I feel like, to carry the team. Even with a world-class cast around him, he is just a player who makes stuff happen on the football pitch, and he's great. He's got a little bit of interest in him from Barcelona. I do fear from past experience in Football Manager that a player like Erk is just going to be sold as soon as I leave. Obviously, we will hope that's not going to be the case. Interesting to note that Poyana gets in on the left wing. I don't know how to feel about Poyana. For £7 million, it looks like an absolute bargain. And to be fair, he's put in some really, really hefty performances over the year, but he occasionally went missing. Occasionally, he lost his head and got a red card. Is a weird one. I'm not sure if he ever redeemed himself for the red card he got in that Champions League quarter-final, I think it was a few years ago against United. You can see here, 201 appearances for him. And while leading the line, the man with the most goals in this entire list, it's Blas Gonzalez, the Spanish forward, over 100 goals for the club. Still no goals for Spain. And as he kind of, I suppose, enters the peak of his career, age 27, you'd have to argue he's been a pretty good player for us. For £53 million in January, it'd be safe to say that his first kind of half season at the club was a tad concerning. We played him out on the wing. It didn't really work. From there onwards, though, we played him as a striker. And to be fair, we've never really looked back. Obviously, this year, maybe a tad disappointing by his own standards, but you really can't look beyond his superb goal-scoring form. Joined us from Levante for £53 million, not a small sum of money, but the amount of important goals he got on big stages, the amount of important goals he got to get us, through Champions League games single-handedly, I do not think that this would be a Forest team that would have achieved as much as it has without him. Elsewhere in the team, you can see Danny Dyer appears on the bench. Regina's here as well. He's still playing for PSG. Was he worth 190 million? I mean, the ratings aren't bad for him, but when you look at his actual polygon and stuff, The answer's no, everyone. He's not worth 190 million. I think that was probably the best bit of business in the save game. Elsewhere, Wilson Samake, aged 32, pops up for Beijing. He has declined a fair bit as a player in recent years. You can see only 3 goals for him in the CSL season this most recent year. Van Dijk, of course, who we sold to Arsenal just this year, has not had a bad year at all. I say that. He's had a bloody awful year, hasn't he? I'm trying to be kind to him because he's in the best 11. But for a player signed for 80 million, I think we got the better end of this deal. 3 goals, 1 assist, a 6.77 average rating. That is a bit of a yikes. Elsewhere, we've got Alex Mighton here, who is still going strong playing for Olympiacos, but I do envisage he's going to retire before too long. Of course, he was a player who we kind of inherited, had for a couple of years. He was a big part, to be fair, of our championship seasons, but once we reached the Premier League, he just wasn't quite of that quality. Obviously, you can see here, he's been making a home for himself in Greece to end his career. And the last of our own players in the best 11 is Finn Amlo, a player who I feel like there's still a hardcore contingent of fans that wish he hadn't been sold, to free up the space for Gonzalez. But I think when you compare them head-to-head like this, you have to say Gonzalez is the better player. Of course, Amlo signed for 23 million upon our promotion to the Premier League, sold for 45. You can see he's had a blooming good year this year in the Championship. 15 assists, 25 goals. I mean, it's great. I assume West Brom got promoted. They didn't. Wow. So he did all of that and they finished 4th. I mean, he's probably going to be in the Championship for another year, although he is wanted by a fair few teams. All in all, though, he was an important part of our team in the early days, a player who allowed us to find stability in the Premier League during those kind of nervy first couple of seasons where you fear, immediately getting relegated once again. The only player who in this list hasn't played for us is Joe Worrell, but he doesn't even have a profile anymore, so I can't tell you how good he is or how great he was, but he has got 245 games, which is not too shabby. Worth noting that the player with the most appearances here is Adrian Smith with 370, and he's actually tied with Piotr, which I think is quite fitting. Of course, Piotr, our captain, and he's been our captain for a very long time. I hold him in very, very high regard. Anyway, the next thing we're going to have a look at is just the club legends, icons and favoured personnel. Not too much going on here, really. You can see Irk and ourselves considered club legends. I think that's pretty fair. Elsewhere in the icons, we actually have no players who entered the icons section besides Irk going all the way to a legend. But in favoured personnel, you've got Piotr, you've got Largo, you've got Gonzalez, and you've got Smith. I feel like they are 4 players alongside Irk you would consider perhaps the 5 key players with this save game who really allowed Nottingham Forest to thrive like they have. So I'm very, very happy to see all of them there. It's probably worth noting, I feel like you might be sat watching this thinking, Jack, this is very Nottingham Forest-centric, this kind of end-of-season review, considering, of course, we were the manager of Lincoln, weren't we? We were the manager of Lincoln. Of course, we got them to the Championship alongside Boston, but sadly, they've not been able to hold their places in the world. The reason, really, for not talking about Lincoln or Boston in much more detail is it was over 10 years ago. Most of the players I had back then have retired and kind of faded into obscurity. You may remember a long time ago now, a few seasons ago, in fact, I did a kind of Where Are They Now episode. The majority of the players had kind of just vanished, sadly. So as a result, there isn't really much I can say, obviously, about Lincoln and Boston. It almost feels like a lifetime ago that we were their managers. Of course, we managed to get Lincoln to the Championship, and for the longest period of time, they were stable there. Relegated last year, and unfortunately, they are not bouncing back this year. Just to give a little, tip of the hat, I suppose, to Boston United as well. You can see here, they ended up finishing 6th. They lost in the playoff semi-finals, unfortunately. If we just have a look here, they lost to Bolton, who are going pretty strong at the moment, of course. We took Boston relatively high up the Football League. We took them, in fact, I say that, we actually took them to the National League. Then they got promoted, and then they kind of chased behind us. Of course, they had all that money from the Sam York sale, who I feel like if we're gonna look at one player from our previous clubs, it probably has to be Sam York, just to give him a nod. He's 31 years old now. Does anyone else feel old all of a sudden? Of course, we sold him to Southampton for 11.5 million from Boston United. That's the money that really allowed Boston to climb up the league. From there, he went to Hamburg, and for the last few years, he's playing for Augsburg, where he's actually had a few really good years. 10 goals in the Bundesliga the year before this one. This year, slightly more disappointing in terms of goals, but still getting plenty of assists, which gives me, I suppose, a little warm, fuzzy feeling inside. And he also went on to be a regular international for the Republic of Ireland. So, Sam York, you know what? We salute you. Of all the players that we had in our early years, you're the man who's kind of gone on to the greatest and best things here. So, You deserve some credit for that at the very least. Anyway, if we have a just look at the history of the club here, you can see, of course, we've won 5 Premier Leagues in a row, actually. I think I earlier said it was 4. It's 5 Premier Leagues in a row, because we've just won it for the 2036 season. That's not been added on just yet. Gonzalez is got 120 goals, got a little way in terms of league goals to catch up with Morris, who has 199. And in terms of goals in a season, 36. Yeah, we're not breaking that record either, sadly for us. Of course, a Champions League won under our stewardship, a number of Premier Leagues as well. We won a Club World Cup, a Europa League, a lot of FA Cups and Carabao Cups. All in all, I feel like we did flesh out the trophy cabinet just a little bit for the team. If we have a look at the records here, I'm going to struggle to go through all of these, and there may be a few that I miss. So if you spot anything in this video that I don't acknowledge, please do write it in the comments. You can see here our highest league position, of course. We won a Premier League. Most points in the season was 105, which, of course, would have been in the Championship, I think, when there's 46 games played. This year we got 102 points with 8 games fewer played, so we would have probably broken that points total, which... I don't know, that stings a little bit to know you kind of what could have been. Could we have beaten it with a few extra games? Could we have beaten it with a few extra seasons and gone on an even better run than the one we've already been on? I'd like to believe that we probably could have. Highest attendance you can see here was against Manchester United back in 1967. With the new ground being built, that record is almost certainly going to be beaten, which is very, very exciting. In terms of average attendance, that's a recently set record, of course. With our newly kind of expanded City ground, we were able to set that. But as we move into a new ground, expect to see that smashed out the water as well. In terms of record transfer fee received, 190 million for Regina, and then highest fee paid, Danny Dyer from Wolves. Don't know how to feel about that one. Danny Dyer, I don't know how to feel about... How should I feel about Danny Dyer? How should I feel about this man? Like... I feel like he let me down in the Champions League final when it mattered the most, but there's no denying he has been a relatively solid goalkeeper for us. Whether or not he actually justified 155 million, I kind of doubt it somewhat. Anyway, you can see here, in terms of player records, Gonzalez has the most overall goals by a player in a season, which is very, very impressive. Has the most assists in the season by a player with 32. You can see here, the fastest goal was scored actually during the save game, but before I was at the club, so I have no affiliation to that record whatsoever. Danny Dyer's 27 clean sheets in a season is a record. With 16 player of the matches has also done well. Youngest goal scorer, Adrian Smith. Oldest goal scorer, Erling Haaland, who of course is leaving the club. I don't know if I mentioned this. Haaland started crying. He was like, "Boss, I don't want to be a thumbnail signing. I want to go to Russia." So we have actually sold him to Zenit. He leaves there in the summer. I don't know. I probably could have used that for clickbait. Oh my God, I sold Haaland. I missed out on that now. I'll have to regret it forever. In terms of attendance, as you can see here, we were always really selling out. And then, of course, we expanded the stadium a few years ago. In terms of biggest win every season, you can see them here. The 9-0 win against Watford, the overall record. Most games were won in a row. 15 this year was our personal best. Most games without losing. 62! 62 was a really good record. Unfortunately, it did come to a halt earlier on this year. But a 62 unbeaten run in all competitions. I mean, that's pretty dominant. Most goals by a player in the season, you can see here, Gonzalez, 4 seasons in a row, he was our top goal scorer. Before that, it was Finn Amlo. Before that, it was Wilson Samake. And of course, this year, it's Adebayo. I feel like each of these marks a different era of Nottingham Forest striker as we've ascended up through the league. So I think we may now be entering the Adebayo kind of era of goal scoring. In terms of transfer fees spent, you can see the record transfers here. Of course, in recent years, it kind of got to a point where we could just spend whatever we wanted. In terms of fees received, you can look through them here. We've been quite weird, I feel like, with our sales. We've had a few really big sales, but a lot of our kind of transfers out have been just a lot of players we signed for cheap, moving on for 30 to 40 million. There's not been loads of huge, big name sales. Very often, it's been a number of smaller transfers that have then funded the bigger moves that we've gone for in terms of signing some big guns. Anyway, that's kind of a little bit of a look at the club records and stuff. In terms of, I guess, my own personal club overview, my own personal favourite players, I think it goes without saying Erk is obviously up there. I've never had a player who dislikes big matches according to my kind of coaches and my scouts, but still consistently plays so well. I think also when you consider how much he improved at the club, that always adds a bit of sweetness. I don't know about you guys, but there is nothing more satisfying than going to this screen here and then just looking at the overall development of a player under your leadership. I mean, you look at how much he's improved in terms of his mentals, in terms of his technicals, in terms of his physicals. He, of course, joined us a number of years ago for £9.5 million, a player who was kind of on my radar because he was playing in the Bundesliga aged 17. Usually that's a sign that a player's got something special about them, and, well, our scouts and my own hunches were not too wrong on that. I think when you look at it, it was probably the transfer that's made the biggest difference with this save game. It's the kind of deal that if it hadn't happened, you kind of wonder, would we have even found ourselves in the situation we find ourselves in now? Elsewhere, I think I have to obviously give a nod to Piotr, who I've already given many a nod to, but let's give him another nod here. Piotr, you are blooming brilliant, son. He's been top draw. Elsewhere, and it might not be surprising, I really like David Lind. And I don't know why I like David Lind, and I feel like I should have got so much more out of him. But I think he's just quite a cool player. Super well-rounded. 20 vision, 18 passing. Yeah, I'm excited to see what becomes of him. He's only 25 as well, which is a little crazy to think about. Of course, in terms of other players to kind of mention, I want to mention players like Quansah from way back when, but I don't think he exists. I mean, he retired at aged 30. He retired in 2033. So 3 years ago, he was playing for Newport County back then. But of course, he was such an important player to the way that we played during the early days. He was kind of he was kind of Piotr before we had Piotr from corners in the lower leagues. 14 goals in 102, then 13 goals for Lincoln as well. Of course, he wasn't quite of the quality to be able to bring to Nottingham Forest with us, but during the early days he definitely made a name for himself. A bit of a legend of Lincolnshire, I suppose, with the numbers that he produced for both Lincoln and Boston United. And it's nice to see, actually, in the end of his career at Newport County, he did actually get some regular first team football, as for the kind of couple of clubs before that he hadn't played nearly as much. I think elsewhere, Gonzalez deserves a nod as one of my favourite players, but I do feel like the recent season it adds a blemish to his record that I'm not sure if I can get over. But I mean, there's no denying, between him and Amlo, obviously magical stuff happened. And yeah, I mean, I think as a whole, this team is one that I've grown quite attached to, just because there's not been a massive turnover in players. A lot of the players in the first team are players who have been at the club a number of years now, especially on the bench as well. We've not had a situation where we've been selling a load of first team players and then replacing them every year. There's been a sustained period of stability, and it's kind of allowed the team, I think, to grow, and for me to grow quite fond of them. And well, speaking of myself, I have to be selfish a little bit here. Shall we talk about my own manager profile, which hasn't been talked about nearly enough? Interesting to note here that Andy Lyons, you may remember, we massively overpaid for him when we were Boston United manager. He's in my favourite personnel, as is Paul Glatzel, who we still just have a great relationship with. He's now Darlington manager. Of course, we signed him for Lincoln City back in the day. But you can see here, in terms of our characteristics, I stopped doing press conferences a little while ago. There was a period of time where I tried to do them all, but I'm sure if you're like me, kind of after you've played about 20 seasons of Football Manager across all your save games, you've kind of seen all the press questions, so it's not quite as exciting. You can see here, in terms of what I'm known for, leading team to title wins. That's what we want to see. Playing attacking football that's high tempo, signing compatriots, which literally means that I sign multiple players of the same nationality. Which is true. I do like to bring players in as pairs. I don't know why, but I kind of appreciate the fact Football Manager recognises that. Of course, a load of these are just signed young players, but with loads of different phrasing. You can see, prefers not to sign players approaching the second half of their careers. I think that's fairly accurate. Prefers not to sign players approaching the end of their careers. I mean, I was trying to turn that around. I signed Donnarumma. I signed Mbappe. I signed Haaland. I signed Trent Alexander-Arnold. Get rid of that one. No, in all seriousness, though, until the last few years, you could definitely agree with that. I think with Football Manager, I think having a young squad is a really good way to go, especially if you've got young players who are really good leaders and are super influential. I'd rather have a young player who's a natural-born leader than have an older player who I kind of have as a token old person in the team, so that I have some more experience, who actually doesn't have the best mentals or the best attitude or the best personality. In terms of our actual attributes, obviously, these have changed a fair bit over the year. When we first started out, we were a Sunday league with no coaching badges. they've grown a little bit over the years. There were a lot of ones when we started out, if I remember correctly. So I do feel like we've made some pretty good progress. And of course, you can see here, 877 games played, 575 won, 144 drawn, 158 lost. All in all, pretty blooming good. A 65% win percentage as well is it's not too bad. I mean, if we look at my history here, you can see longest time at club, 3,000 even, 3,510 days. Total value of players bought, 1.86 billion. Total value of players sold, 219 billion. So, yeah, I did actually make a profit with all our transfers and stuff. 0 days spent on holiday as well is pretty nice. And, well, you can have a look here at some of our other achievements. Lots of cup wins over the years. Lots of goals scored for. And all in all, it's been a pretty good campaign, I'd say. 15 cup wins, 9 leagues won, 4 promotions, 0 relegations. And of course, you can see at the top here what we were able to achieve at Nottingham Forest. 6 of those 9 league wins, of course, coming whilst we've been at this Forest side. Anyway, I feel like as I look through this, there's not too much more I want to talk about to wrap up this episode, other than look at the game status screen, just to show you what my addictiveness rating is as much as anything else. If you've not seen this screen before, you are given a dedication factor as well as a game time here. Now, I've not actually played 42 days, everyone. What's happened there is I've left the game running a lot. I'm someone who likes to leave the game running in the background, but I feel like it's fun to do with FM. It's just to kind of have it running in the background. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I'll leave FM in the background, be doing other stuff, and then kind of tab into FM every so often, fiddle with it for 2 minutes, then go back to doing something else. I can't put it down. It's a bit of a problem. Our dedication factor is, what are humans? To which I answer, I don't know. I only know regens now. We're that far into the future. Never heard of humans. But no, all in all, we've had a very, very good year. Obviously, this date you can see that this save game was created was the 24th of November. That was when this adventure started. And today, as I record it, it's now the 5th of May. This is a save game that has consumed 6 months of my life, and it has been an absolute pleasure. Anyway, I kind of mentioned wrapping up this episode. I totally forgot. There's actually something that we need to do here. And the first thing we're going to do is resign. And the next thing I'm going to do is, I'm going to holiday forward to the first home game of the season. We are going to go and attend Nottingham Forest's first game in their new stadium. I am no longer their manager. We might take a peek at their new manager, what his early transfer business has been. But I feel like to end things off here, the most fitting end of all is to go and attend a game in the brand new stadium. So with that all said, with that all in mind, let's hop forward. Let's see what becomes this Nottingham Forest team. Who is going to replace me? I'm a little bit excited to find out. Okay, everyone, it's August 16th, 2036, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Nottingham Forest's first game in their new stadium is against Manchester United at home in the Premier League. Could you ask for a better start? Could you ask for a better fixture to welcome in this ground? I'm very, very excited to attend this and see what becomes of things. Just to have a quick look at Nottingham Forest, you can see here, Almeida has replaced us as manager. He has won the Community Shield, although he did draw the first game of the season. So already things could be on the rocks for them. I say all of that knowing that our first game last season we also drew. So maybe we're coming to conclusions prematurely. If we just look at the transfer history, however, they've not signed anyone yet. They've sold a lot of players. How much? 196 million. Who have they sold? I feel sick. I feel they've sold Urk to Barcelona for 137 million, and they've sold Piotr to Spurs. I mean, you've just sold the soul of the club. Right, everything hurts. I now kind of hope... No, I was about to say now I hope they lose this first game. I don't hope that at all. Look at this new stadium. 50,000-seater stadium, the Brian Clough Stadium. I think it has the potential to be expanded to in excess of 60,000 fans in capacity as well. And well, this is our entire legacy has led to this point. I suppose we'll see how they get on, Forest, in their first kind of game at the new ground. It looks very empty. Why are there barely any... I know it's raining, lads. I mean, it's not a packed house, is it, for the first game of the new season? Anyway, with this, I'm going to just show the highlights. So we're going to cut through things, edit it through. We don't want to watch the match in full. I'll bring you all the best bits. Largo doing Largo things. Options in the middle. Tarasov's there. He heads wide. Why am I not surprised? I'm curious, actually, just while we're here. How are they actually playing? They're playing a 4-2-3-1 with Davio in the middle, Edison on the right, Ballo on the left, Linden Largo in the middle, Twardzik and Devolder in midfield with Navio and Sampaio at wing back. So it's not a million miles away from what we're playing, but it definitely is a little bit different. I do sit here really wanting to see Nottingham Forest get some revenge over United, but I do fear if they win this game, suddenly I look like I was holding the team back. If they beat United here, suddenly I'm the fraud. Largo flies in with a tackle, Bruno Alves with it. Eze hits it, oh my word. I mean, that was a pretty nice finish by Jude Eze, to be fair. Not bad at all. Largo to whip in the ball. Are there options in the middle? I mean, Piotra's not there. How are you going to score from a corner without Piotra? The answer, you're not. Sampaio to Lin. Tries to thread through Tarasov. Oh my word, what has just happened? I mean, Tarasov did not need to tap that in. He has stolen David Lin's goal there. I don't think there's many players in this Forest team I actively dislike. I feel like I do have a weird disdain towards Tarasov, though. Signed for £87 million. He was useless for me. And now he's just still... I mean, that is David Lin's goal. No one can convince me otherwise. And he's launched it very quickly to Adebayo. Where's Adebayo going? Where's he going? Can he do it all? There's off to Tarasov. Adebayo, Edison. I'll tell you what. That was a tasty little goal. Edison tucks it away. I think Edison is going to end up being a really, really good player for this team. Of course, he and Adebayo kind of competing for a similar spot in the team. We, of course, started playing Edison kind of out on the right-hand side. I do feel like those two players are going to be end up into the best players in the world quite comfortably. They are absolutely nuts. It feels weird sitting here and watching this game and not being able to make any tactical changes. Like, it doesn't feel right. The stuff I'd be doing at this point. I don't think I'm allowed to shout from the sidelines and from the stand different sub-changes I'd make, but absolutely nothing is happening. This feels like a game destined to finish 2-1 unless there's a sting in the tail. Correa heads it away, but only as far as Aturo, who plays it to Nianzou. I mean, if United get an equaliser, it's going to be a bit of a sucker punch here. Eze, edge of the box. Can he pull it in? He does. It's blocked away. Maynard, Bruno Alves, Diaz. They're passing it around nicely, but someone needs to shoot for United, and, well, they don't. So it's a win for Nottingham Forest in their new stadium. Edison got man of the match as well. Don't know how I feel about this 4-2-3-1 malarkey. Very generic. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a default Gengen press they're playing as well. But you can see here, the best viewing was found at the Brian Clough Park. Sorry, I said earlier it was the Brian Clough Stadium. It's the Brian Clough Park, everyone. 38,000 fans turned up. That's a slightly concerning attendance when it's got a capacity of 50,000, but that's what happens if you sell Urk. If you sell Urk, the fans just aren't going to show up. And you only have yourself to blame, Almeida. It's on you, son. Anyway, that's going to wrap up this episode from me. A nice little farewell to see them get some revenge over United. As I said, over the next kind of few days, I'm going to have 2 separate in the future videos coming up. We'll probably do one kind of 2 or 3 years in the future. Maybe we'll jump forward to 5 years. And then from there, we'll look at 10 and maybe 25 years into the future as well, just to see what's becoming of our little old Nottingham Forest side. Anyway, gang, I hope you have enjoyed today's episode of Park to Prem. I hope it was nice to have a little look at the squad as a whole. As I mentioned before, the save game for this will all be available over on Patreon for supporters tomorrow. I will have a link down in the description that I'll add to this video once that is there, for those of you who want to check it out. And of course, it will unlock for everyone just 7 days later. If you've enjoyed today's video, do drop a like on it. I appreciate the support massively. If you want to give any predictions for what you think's going to happen in the future in Nottingham Forest, leave them down in the comments. And well, until next time, it is me, Jack, and I will talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.